Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 2, Chapter 28, Regretful Competition. So last week, we saw a number of things. We listened to me rant and rave about ill handling before an idiotic writing group. We saw Paymaster Stenstrom discover under duress the side operation aboard the Sandwich, where the captain was selling cheap, crappy Zamuda doctored to taste like Canaan grain spirits to the Zaffins, and was making a fair amount of money because the Zaffins have a real thirst for Canaan's grain spirits and can't legally get them. The Zaffins are the enemy after all, and the League is not going to provide any sort of comfort to the enemy, giving them a drink that they really want. So enterprising chaps such as Lieutenant Dunkster will step in and fill that role, although he doesn't have any Canaan grain spirits to give them. Instead, he's got this really cheap, hangover-inducing liquor, a synthetic liquor from Baz, but he knows how to make it taste pretty much like Canaan grain spirits, and these Zaffin stiffs couldn't tell the difference until Bosun Pike and the first officer decided to turn their coats and let the Zaffin scalawag know what the deal was. They sang like a bird, they spilled the freaking beans. And this Zaffin guy was wanting to blow Lieutenant Dunkster and the Sandwich along with him to bits. Paymaster Stenstrom is called to the bridge, and he finds during this critical moment in battle that Lieutenant Dunkster has been incapacitated due to taste testing his brew and having sex with one of his errand wives who was all rubbed up on the weed. It all clashed in his system and took him right out. Stenstrom gave him a white holy stone to help calm his system, and then under his tentative leadership got him out of the Kills the Terebus field of destroyed ships and got them to safety when the new faith came into the theater to protect them. And that's where he meets Captain Davidge, who would become his captain and his friend. So we're done with that chapter. It was a big long chapter. This one here, chapter 28, A Regretful Competition, is much shorter, only 5 pages, and it is also the last chapter in part 2, and then we will move on to part 3, and the plot will then resume, and I can finally get my knickers out of a wad. Finally we can get back to the plot, such as it is. Let us proceed immediately. This is I think it's kind of an emotional chapter, a sad chapter, but let's see what it has to offer. Part 2, Chapter 28, A Regretful Competition. A few days later, the new faith dropped Stenstrom off in Bern, where he took up residence in the Ibana apartments. There, he caught up with Lady Alatrix, and she marveled at his attire and his stories. He was glad to hear she'd moved on, found a good man with whom she could be happy. He also sent word to Callie, who was frantic. She was certain he'd been lashed raw and thrown in prison. He told her what had happened, and she was overjoyed, though she was also very upset that he wasn't to be returning to the ship. He met up with her when the Sandwich arrived in Mercia again, and he was hailed as a hero by the crew. He and Callie also shared each other's bed a few more times, one for the road, as she said. He was going to miss Callie. She was a good friend. He also wrote to Lily to share his good fortune. Lily, though, was silent. He received no reply. As he waited and burned, Stenstrom's comm chirped. It was his sister Lyra. "Hello, Belle," she said. "Lyra! Well, this is a great surprise. It had been a long time since he'd last seen her. She wore a university pin on the shoulder of her gown. She seemed sad. Belle, you need to come home. Oh, Lyra, you're starting to sound like Mother. What is it this time? Belle, Mother's dead. He sat there and tried to comprehend. What? How? It can't be. Mother was old, Belle. It was just her time. I think she knew it was coming. She asked all of us to come home. I think she wanted to see us all one last time. He thought about that for a moment. He hadn't come home. He did what she had asked. He resisted. We're all lingering here to hold vigil with Father and celebrate her memory. You need to come home, Belle. We need you here. I need you. Yes, Lyra, yes. I'm coming at once. The 4-hour trip to Tyrol on the large liner was guilt-ridden and phantom-filled. His mind was ablaze. I knew something was wrong. I knew it. Why didn't I come home? His mother's voice rang in his ear. I told you to play the game, Belle. To the very end, I played the game. There are no givebacks. The black maidens, the soul devourers, the creatures in the mirror, and the stain on his soul. Mother was playing the game. But why didn't she tell me? As he waited for the liner to come in from Burned Port, he wondered at the lack of black maidens. They were crawling after him previously, but now there were none. He even took off his bolabung. Nothing. Now that he wanted one to zap him home straight away, there were none. He thought about finding a quiet spot and summoning a black maiden or two. The bad thing, he was terrible at it. The summoning was quite difficult, despite the fact Mother made it look rather easy. Even Lyra wasn't very skilled at it. Virginia was quite adept. Even if he could summon one, it wouldn't do any good. They weren't a taxi service, take me here, take me there. They would send him back to the place where they'd been summoned, period. So he waited for the liner and felt the pounding throb of guilt seep into his mind. He wondered about all the usual things. Did Mother know how much he loved her? Did Mother know how grateful he was for all she taught him? The recriminations could go on and on. Surrounded by ghosts and pointed fingers, he drifted off to sleep as the liner lifted off and headed east. Snap! The old dream again. The sand pit, the afternoon sun, and the stars shining in broad daylight. This time the dream was different. This time all 29 of his sisters and his father were there, watching him sailing through the air. He landed in the sand and something lurched out of it. Everything went black, just like always. Open your eyes, Belle, he heard a voice say. He opened them and there was his mother, leaning over him, her swoop of pewter-lock hair shining in the sun. What's bothering you? She asked. You died. Oh, what's so strange about that? I was 250 years old. How old do you wish I get? Why didn't you tell me? Because I told you to resist me. Telling you I was dying would have been cheating. Mother, I wasn't there when you died. No, but you were there all the other times. You were in your crib every morning, snoring away. How I loved to watch you sleep. You were in the manor, filling the halls with your laughter. You were there at the dining table, sitting right where I could see you. You were a good friend to your sisters, and a good son to your mother. I'm glad you weren't there, Belle. I'm glad your last memory of me wasn't one of weakness, of me on my deathbed. remember me as I was, as a strong woman and a proud mother. Perhaps she'll tell my grandchildren someday of their old grandmother, and let them know she wasn't all that bad." And the dream faded. He heard one final thing. "I didn't send the soul devourers after you. Why would I do that to my beloved son? Farewell." He stood there in the yard with his hat in hand. Mother's new tombstone was there, odd and big. He was wearing his HRN coat and his mask, which he still could not take off. Mother's spell holding even in death. Lyra stood next to him. He'd been all through the manor. Mother's bed was fresh and made. She wasn't there. He'd been to the dining room where Mother held court, and the sitting rooms and the library she once haunted. No Mother. Here she was, out in the yard under her gravestone. She would never again sleep in her bed and terrorize his sisters in the dining room, and she would tell no more gossip in the sitting rooms. Mother was dead and crushed. Unable to face the moment, he dropped his hat and fell to his knees in the new dirt of her grave. He felt like he did when he was a child. He wanted his mother. He wanted to claw his way into the dirt and pull her out and shake her awake. Lady Jubilee could not be dead. Death could be no match for her. "Mother, wake up! Wake up!" "Did you see her at the end, Lyra?" he asked. "Yes." "Did she wonder where I was?" "She wanted me to tell you it was all right. She understood. She wanted me to tell you that she was proud of you, of the man you've become." He glanced down at his coat and felt the fabric of his mask, suddenly feeling very silly. "Yes, and just look at me. What am I?" Lyra embraced her brother. "You are who you are, Belle. I think if Mother had given you every freedom, if she hadn't plunged the knife into your chest, you still would have ended up with a coat and a mask. Perhaps the fabric might have been a different shade, perhaps the mask less prominent, but they would still been there, all the same." Lyra joined him in the dirt. "Look at me, and the costume I wear, this gown. Is my costume so different from yours? You followed your heart, you didn't let your dreams die, and ended up in the stars like you've always wanted. Coat and mask. You are what you wanted to be." Stenstrom smiled and wiped his face. "Virginia's wedding. The planning is not finished, I'm told." "I'm gonna help her plan it, and so will Lucille. Though a wedding at this time, it seems perfect to me," Stenstrom said. "Life goes on at our household, just as Mother would have wanted it. Her children's lives go on. I think I'm going to stay for a while until I ship out again. I'd like to help plan my sister's wedding." "Well, she'll be very glad to hear that. I'm glad too, Belle. Maybe it'll be like old times. Perhaps later we can go in the sand pit and wrestle like we used to." He laughed. "Sure, I'll beat you down just like I did back then." "Oh, that's not how I remember it, Sandface." He looked around, the hills, the manor, the Marion ruins, home, yet no longer familiar, no longer what it was without Mother's presence. He raised his hand and shook it, producing 3 marzibles. "Here's to our mother, and the richness she left to us," he said. Lyra shook her hand, producing the same. "Here's to Lady Jubilee, the woman who watched over us, the woman who loved us," she said. And they embraced, the shadows of the afternoon growing long. 3 months later, he became the paymaster of the new faith. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 28, A Regretful Competition, and we conclude Part 2, All That Resists Him. We knew from the earlier part of the book, from the beginning chapters, that Paymaster Stenstrom's mother, Lady Jubilee, had passed away. He mentioned it quite a few times. But it's fitting that this part of the book, which recounts the various key moments of Paymaster Stenstrom's life, ends with his mother's death. Sort of puts a close on it. In many cultures, many religions, death isn't necessarily the end. It's a change, a new beginning in some cases. And with this death of his mother, Stenstrom begins his career as the paymaster of the new faith and all that goes with it. See the Temple of the Exploding Head books for more. Just a quick promo. And we see that he's full of all the usual guilts and recriminations. He should have come home when she asked him to. He should have done this, she should have done that, but he realized he was playing the game she asked him to play. And when he dreamt of seeing her that last time, she even told him, I didn't want you to see me on my deathbed. So we are finally done with the biggest part of the book, Part 2, All That Resists Him. Next week we move on to Part 3, The Demon That Came for His Soul. And this one is a very short part of the book. It's only, like, I think 4 chapters long. And then we'll be done with Sands of the Solar Empire, the first book in the Belmont Saga. And then we move straight away to Book 2, Against the Druries. And you won't have to wait a year and a half full of nervous anticipation like I had to. I had to find a spot to cut these books into 2, and there wasn't really a good spot, so I had to manufacture an ending, and I wasn't really satisfied with how it ended. I hated leaving it just like that, and some people called me out on that, and rightly so. I don't disagree. But in this case, that year and a half is come and gone, and we will just turn the page and continue on to Book 2, Against the Druries. And as I said before, there's not a whole lot of action in my book, in the first book here, Sands of the Solar Empire. And some people who've read a lot of my books mentioned that tends to be a tendency of mine, where the first book sets up the stage, and then the second or third book really leans into the action. So Against the Druries is a much more action-y book than Sands of the Solar Empire. We've gotten through all the peremptory stuff, and then now we can just get to it, get to the meat, get to the exciting stuff. And it is a good book. I really like Against the Druries, how it came out, and I think it has a really good sense of pacing. It's got a lot of action that happens in it, a lot of exciting moments. As Paymaster Stenstrom, Lord Aram, and Private Tara struggle to get the broken down Seeker to Baz to deliver Admiral Durlus brandy. So we will get to that next week, which is Part 3, The Demon That Came for His Soul, and the first chapter is known as Missing. And so we will hit it at that time. Until then, this is, you know what? Fuck it. It's only 1, 2, 4 pages. Let's read. Let's move into Part 2. I've been dying to get to back to the plot. I keep talking about it. Let's do it. I'll just put my mouth where my brain is. Let's do it. Part 3, Chapter 1, Missing. The Seeker limped through open space, its progress painfully slow. They had managed, just barely, to get the Seeker going fast enough to break Kanan's orbit, leaving the inviting blue ball with all its safety and comfort behind. They were flying the ship backwards, as the improvised engine of the Westminster was located in forward-facing bay. Stenstrom, Aram, and Tara stayed mostly on the bridge. That's where they had lights, a bit of fresh portable air, the Macon set up, powered on, happily spewed condensed oxygen. In such a condition, the bridge was halfway livable. They had completed several burns, using nothing but dead reckoning as their AM and PM compasses were offline. Tara's mollied-up smarts were a godsend. If not for her and Aram's molly, they would still be plummeting into Kana's atmosphere. And she was still at it, putting her soul more at risk with every use. We'll keep Kana in the window for a few more hours. Then at the Mersey Ice Swarm, we'll bank to 2:30 p.m., do a long burn with the Westminster, and make a beeline for Onaris, riding Jury's Belt the whole way. We'll course correct again once we're there, using its gravity to pick up some speed, and then it's on to Baz for the final push. Tara patted the golden chain at her neck. She gazed with wonder at the pages of calculations she'd made on scavenged paper, all fueled by the molly. This thing is great, Aram. You're gonna have to fight me to get this back. I love this. Well, what about the horde of demons you're gonna have after you? You've generated quite the butcher's bill that your soul shall have to pay. Well, screw 'em. Stenstrom was unsure. Tara, you positive you know where we're headed? Well, come see for yourself. They went into his office and looked out the windows. Tara had constructed a crude sextant-like device out of metal struts. She picked it up, aimed, and pointed to a large whitish star hanging just starboard beyond the silhouette of the Seeker's cranked wing. That big whitish-blue star out there is New Toriander, or Old Scrub as we call it. That's Onaris and Baz's star. Now that smaller white star hanging off Old Scrub's ear, you see it? That's Lil Whiteface, New Toriander's dwarf companion star. That's what gives us freaking scorching hot summers on Baz. Damn thing. Stenstrom looked at Old Scrub bright in the window. It doesn't even look like it's moving, does it? Nope, she said, still staring through her sextant. But it is, slowly but surely. Soon we'll be seeing Drury's Belt. It's just a big long cloud of glowing gas they used to use as a navigational aid back in the day. Tara laid the sextant down, stretched, and gave a long yawn. Whoa, I am bushed. It's been a busy 2 days. I'm feeling pretty used up myself. Here, you can have my office, Tara. Stretch out and get some sleep. He went back out on the bridge, Tara following him. I'm fine. I don't need a separate room. I never had one in the Marines, so I really don't need one now, do I? She went to her favorite spot at the missives panel and removed her coat and boots. She balled up her coat into a pillow and plunked down into the chair, feet up. This isn't bad. Feeling dead himself, Stenstrom flopped down into his chair. Aram, why don't you lock the helm and get a little sleep as well? We're on course, right? Well, according to the last dead reckoning Tara made, we're on course. We shouldn't need a course correction for another 20 hours. I've got the helm's alarm set. According to the charts, we're headed into the wastelands between the stars. The chart has a bunch of vague references to artifacts coming up. Oh, what are those? Stenstrom asked. Tara chimed in, her voice groggy. Ice, dust, gas, just stuff floating around. Our next burn, that's an important one, she mumbled, settling in to sleep. Nice long 5-minute burn. We miss it, we'll go off into the wildlands on the other side of Drury's Belt. Bad things happen off in the wildlands. That's what we say on Baz. Oh, please. We won't miss it, Aram replied. I've got the alarm set in any case. He locked the helm and stepped down into the bridge, finding a comfortable spot at the navigator's seat. Aram recited a short prayer and curled up on the chair. "Right, Belle," he said, wiggling around. Nearby, Tara was already out, her little chest rising and falling, accompanied by a bit of snoring. "Good dreams," Stenstrom replied. As he watched the two of them sleep, he drew his ints and laid them on his lap. He felt like he'd known these two his entire life, and he wasn't going to allow anything to happen to them. Not now, not ever. Tara snored a little more, and Aram twitched. The Macon blew fresh air, and every so often a light blinked on the various consoles. Other than that, the ship was quiet. Stenstrom got up out of his seat and set up various bits of arcane protections. His silver candlesticks, pans, and various holy stones scattered about meant to warn him of danger. They were silent, and silent was good. After a time, he allowed his mind to wander and his eyes to grow heavy. He was tired too, and soon he slept. He was pulled out of his sleep by an alarm ticking steadily. He looked around, bleary-eyed. The alarm was coming from the helm. "Aram, I think your alarm's going off," he said, trying to clear the sleep out of his eyes. He stretched and settled back into sleep. The alarm dug a galling trench in his thoughts and woke him up. "Ugh, didn't you say the alarm was set for 20 hours hence?" He opened his eyes. "There's no way we slept for that long, right?" No answer. The alarm continued to blare. Stenstrom stood and stretched. "Aram, kill that thing, would you please?" Aram wasn't where he was when Stenstrom had fallen asleep. The navigator's position was empty. The missive's chair was also empty. Tara was missing too. Her marine coat and boots were there, but no Tara. He was alone on the bridge. "Aram? Tara?" he shouted. No answer. He went to his office, seeing the motionless diorama of stars against the gigantic, blackened silhouette and cranked wings of the Seeker. It reminded him of the Tyrol coastline at night, long and black under a sea of stars. Nobody was there. As he watched, he saw a light snap on far away in the rear section of the ship, near the wings, glowing like a campfire, and then it went out. And with that, we conclude Part 3, Chapter 1, Missing. So, they're well on their way to Baz, flying backwards. As I said, the Westminster fits in Ripcar Bay number 5, and that's the only one it fits in. It's too large for the other ones. And Ripcar Bay number 5 faces the front of the ship, so that if using its thrust as an engine, it's going to push the Seeker backwards. So they're flying backwards to Baz. Tara made a bunch of computations, said, "Hey, we're coming up on a burn in 20 hours, and we don't want to miss it because we'll go off into the wildlands." And according to all the lore and scuttlebutt from Baz, the wildlands is a dangerous place where bad things happen. Still being a little superstitious, she'd like to avoid that area if she could. She says, "We don't want to miss it." Aram locks the helm, sets the alarm. They go to have a nap, and then 20 hours later, Stenstrom hears the alarm going off, and he's by himself on the bridge. Tara, Aram, gone. Hence the name of the chapter, Missing. He goes out, looks through the windows of his office, and his window looks out on the aft part of the ship. So he sees the neck, the long neck of the ship. It's kind of a swan shape, the Seeker. He sees the wings, and all the lights are off because the Seeker doesn't really have any power. So it looks like a big black shape, dappled with stars dappled all around it. If you imagine if you're on a beach on a starry night sky and there's a blackened piece of driftwood floating in. That's kind of what it looks like, just a black shape amid the stars. And then ominously, he sees a light in the far part of the ship come on and then go off. So, next week, we will continue part 2, or actually part 3, chapter 2, Haunted, as Paymaster Stenstrom sets out to find what happened to Tara and Aram. So, we will look forward to that next week. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.